শুভ সন্ধ্যা আমি জুডিথা ওমাকার ইউনিভার্সিটি অফ লিবারাল আর্টস বাংলাদেশ ইউল্যাবের কমিউনিকেশন অফিসের উপদেষ্টা আজকে এই গ্লোবাল ট্রেন্ডস ইন মিডিয়া এডুকেশন আলোচনায় সবাইকে শুভেচ্ছা বর্তমানে জাতীয় রাজনীতি ও বিষয় অর্থনীতি একটা জটিল সময় পার করছে এই সময়ে মিডিয়ার গুরুত্ব ও অনেক বেশি মিডিয়া ইন্ডাস্ট্রিও পাল্টে যাচ্ছে একই সাথে বদলে যাচ্ছে মিডিয়া শিক্ষা এই পরিবর্তনের ধারা ও তার আলোকে মডার্ন মিডিয়া শিক্ষা যেখানে সোশ্যাল মিডিয়া ব্লগিং ও ডিজিটাল টেকনোলজির গুরুত্ব দিন দিন বাড়ছে সেই সব বিষয় নিয়ে আমাদের আজকের আলাপ আজকের এই অনুষ্ঠানে আমাদের সাথে দুইজন বিদেশি অতিথি আছেন তাই অনুষ্ঠানটি ইংরেজিতে পরিচালিত হবে তবে সকলের জন্য আমরা বাংলা অনুবাদও সাথে রেখেছি Good evening. Welcome to Global Trends in Media Education. Tonight we are fortunate to have with us one of the most respected and influential international journalists, Mr. Tunku Vadrajan. Tunku was until recently the editor of the Newsweek International and a writer-at-large for the Daily Beast. He's also been executive editor for opinion at Forbes and assistant managing editor at Wall Street Journal, as well as bureau chief for the Times of London. On the education side, he's a professor at New York University's Stern School of Business, Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism, and lecturer in law at Trinity College, Oxford University. He's also a fellow in journalism at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. Welcome, Tunku. We're also fortunate to have with us today Mr. Zafar Soban, who is the editor of the Dhaka Tribune, which is Bangladesh's newest English language daily newspaper. Zafar has also been editor for the opinions and editorials for the Daily Star. He was editor at the Independent newspaper and head of English language news at Independent TV. He was also editor of Forum magazine. He has written extensively for Time, Economic and Political Weekly, Vice, Outlook, as well as The Guardian, among many others. Welcome, Zafar.
Thank you.
Our final guest this evening is Dr. Jude William Vinilo, who is head of the Media Studies and Journalism Department at the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. Jude received his PhD in Communications from the University of Philippines, Diliman. He's also served as a research fellow in Bangkok and was the program director of a PR school in Jakarta. An Asia Fellow, he was awarded a research grant from the UN Foundation International Communication Association. Welcome, Jude.
Good evening.
My first question is for Tunku. You have been in the global media for many, many years. In your opinion, what are the most important changes that are happening in the industry today?
Juditha, there have been several tectonic changes in the media industry in the last 5 to 10 years, the most important of which has been the widespread migration of media to the web, the digitization of newspapers and magazines. And this has resulted in a quite marked decline in print publications, the extinction in many cases of some storied magazines such as Newsweek, my own old publication. And the result of all this has been a destruction of the old business model for journalism. Advertisers no longer find print publications attractive, so print publications are starved of money. And at the same time, web publications haven't proved attractive to advertisers either. So you have a situation where both old and new media don't have the advertising to sustain them, nor do they have the subscription money to sustain them in the absence of advertising. And finally, what we have is the emergence of a whole generation of citizen journalists who've embraced technology, embraced the new media, and have blogging away to their heart's content. I think those are the three main changes.
Well, Zafar, let me ask you, have you seen those changes happening here in Bangladesh, or do you anticipate that they will be happening in the next 10 years?
Well, we're very fortunate here in Bangladesh in that it hasn't happened quite to the same extent in the West. In fact, you could say that we're fortunate to have jobs here in Bangladesh, because in the West many journalists are losing jobs as publications are going out of business, and it's very different here. However, it is already happening. We've just launched the Dhaka Tribune, and at the same time of launching our newspaper, we absolutely had to make sure that our online presence was equally prominent, because there's no way you can enter into the media game today without taking that into consideration. Moving forward into the future, it's going to become more and more important. And we actually are going to have to think of ourselves as news content providers. I think the days of us thinking of ourselves as newspapers are gone. We provide the news content, and people will consume it the way they wish to consume it. Some will consume it via newspapers, some will consume it online, some will use it via SMS, Facebook, Twitter, social media, to say nothing of television and radio, which have always been there, at least you know, for the last several decades. And of course, online, there's multimedia content as well. So we're also looking to podcasts, we're looking to video content. All of these changes are already happening, and they will be accelerated. And it's not just in English media in Bangladesh, it's really, it's happening in Bangla media as well. And I think we need to plan for this the same way media organizations in the West have had to reinvent themselves. We're going to have to do it too. We do have the luxury and the good fortune that internet penetration isn't quite as high yet, that it requires us to take the extreme steps which they've had to take place elsewhere. But it's coming, there's no question about it.
Well, Jude, as an educator, what are you doing to prepare students for this new mediascape, this new way of providing media?
Yeah, just taking off from what they have said. The changes that are happening are really tectonic. And because of this, we know that change is going to be a constant. And for this reason, we know that our students have to have a lifelong love for learning. And one of the ways we do this, and looking at the different methodologies of teaching, active learning would be most important. In active learning, the student has to take charge or responsibility for his own learning. He has to invest not only his money, but also his time and also a lot of effort. He should not let the teacher be in charge of the learning agenda. The student has to set the agenda for himself, what he wants to learn. Now, at ULab, we have been looking at the different activities in active learning, and we found out that we have been implementing a lot of these. For example, in our subjects, students do exhibits, they do debates, they do projects. A lot of active work is done here. For example, we do documentaries with people in industry or in civil society. We also join a lot of these festivals, film festivals or cultural festivals, wherein our students show their paintings, sculptures, digital art, video art, so forth and so on. But we also know that learning does not only take place inside the classroom. A lot of learning takes outside, and that's why we have developed strong co-curricular programs. At ULab, we have a campus paper, we have a campus radio, we recently launched a campus television, and we also have our film and photography apprenticeship program. We know that in media studies, it takes a lot of practice to perfect this profession. And these are the ways wherein students practice towards perfection.
You know, Tunku, you mentioned blogging, and I'm not sure how much you know, but blogging has become a bit of a controversial topic here in the country. During the time of the Shahbag protests, some of the bloggers were called by the Islamists. They said that they had blogged about things that were offensive to religious sentiment. On the other hand, the Islamists were also accused of using social media as a way of fabricating stories in order to inflame sentiment. Now, without going into who's right or wrong about this, why don't you tell us a little bit about how does the international journalistic profession consider blogging today?
That's a complex question, Judith. Blogging, the word blog comes from the words web log, which is a description for the way people can use technology to set up their own journals online. And bloggers are nothing other than people who self-publish themselves. So blogging is a very big thing in the United States where I work and where I live. And it's in fact, it's gone mainstream from its origins as a place where people entered laterally as citizens into a conventional media space. Blogging has now been embraced by the mainstream media. So Not only are bloggers people who sit, as the cliche goes, in their pajamas at home in the middle of the night with a liter bottle of Coke and a large bag of potato chips. Bloggers also work for the New York Times. Bloggers work for the Wall Street Journal. So I think blogging is very much part of the mainstream now in the United States, even though some of the bloggers themselves are not part of the mainstream. As far as Bangladesh is concerned, you're right, I'm not familiar with the issues, but I do believe that blogging can only be a good thing because it's a way for people to debate in public. It's a way to debate rather than to resort to violence. So I think anything that contributes to an enhancement of vocal debating is to be cherished and is to be encouraged. Obviously, when bloggers, like anyone else, can cross a line, you've got to make sure that bloggers respect the law, the laws of libel, laws of incitement to violence. But apart from that, I think bloggers are a good thing.
Bangladesh government is currently proposing a new anti-terrorism law, which human rights groups are saying is going to have a chilling effect on freedom of speech. So how do you think blogging fits into this? Should journalists be using blogging? What are the ethical concerns that they need to have in our context here?
Blogging is absolutely huge in Bangladesh. You have a huge blogging community, and they have become very active and very vocal. In fact, the Shahbag movement, which we had starting some months ago, was in fact initiated by bloggers. And as in the West, we are also in the mainstream media trying to some extent co-opt it. At our Dhaka Tribune website, we have blogs, and we've also been using the tools of blogging. We've live blogged the Rana Plaza collapse. We live blogged May 5th and May 6th, the Hifazat in Dhaka. We have live blogged the city council elections. So we have added that to our sort of repertoire because, as Tunku has mentioned, this is really what the readership in the audience demands. And I always tell my journalists who are working on blogs and who are putting stuff up on our Facebook page, who are putting up stuff on Twitter, is that nevertheless we have to be very professional, very responsible. Our credibility is on the line. Just because we are using these new media or social media, it doesn't mean we should drop our standards. There's no such thing, as I've told my journalists, of people blogging in their individual capacity. If someone is a journalist at the Dhaka Tribune, anything they blog, even on their own personal blog, will at some point be related back to their organization. And indeed, I would make the same argument for citizen journalists as well. They ought to, and I think they do, operate with a certain degree of responsibility. If you want to have the enter into the national discourse and be part of the national discussion, then certainly you should operate within the same bounds that other journalists have to operate. And anything you put up on a blog, it's there in the public domain, so bloggers do need to be aware of this, as journalists need to be aware when they're blogging, that it's not a different set of rules. The rule I have set to them is that the same rules we apply to what is acceptable to put in our newspaper, it is exactly the same rule that we're going to apply in terms of what we can put on blogs.
Jude, how are you educating students about blogs? What do you tell them in the classroom, and how do you train them for this?
Well, blogs as part of the digital media has a good side to it and also a bad side to it. For us, it's a double-edged sword. On the good side, blogs were able to give people a tool wherein they can communicate, they can voice out. People who did not have a voice before could now be heard through blogs. It also strengthens democracy in a way that people participate in governance. But on the other hand, you would see some negative things about blogs. For example, you see bloggers that are disrespectful of other people's views and opinions. You see bloggers that are very negative about and very cynical. They violate ethics left and right. So when we teach our students, we try to teach them first how to blog, the mechanics of it. But what's more important to us is teaching them the ethics and how to be responsible in doing blogs. Because in the end, we are actually training the next generation of journalists in the end, for journalism, it's still important. They should be honest. They should be responsible. They have to be credible. Still, the age-old principles of journalism has to be upheld, even in blogs.
Thank you. We're going to screen a short video which will show a little bit about how media students are being trained here in Bangladesh.
গণমাধ্যম শিক্ষার পদ্ধতি সারা পৃথিবীতেই পরিবর্তিত হচ্ছে। আগের শিক্ষা কার্যক্রমে শিক্ষার্থীদের অংশগ্রহণ ছিল খুবই নগণ্য। অন্যদিকে আধুনিক শিক্ষণ পদ্ধতিতে শিক্ষক ও শিক্ষার্থী উভয়ই সক্রিয়ভাবে অংশগ্রহণ করে। শিক্ষার্থীদের বিশ্লেষণের ক্ষমতা, সৃজনশীলতা, সমালোচনা, প্রায়োগিক দক্ষতা, জ্ঞান অর্জনের এমন নানা ধরনের ব্যবহারে এটি হয়ে উঠেছে শিক্ষার সেরা পদ্ধতি। বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়গুলো টিভি প্রোডাকশনের মতো কোর্সে বিভিন্ন বেসরকারি প্রতিষ্ঠানের সহায়তায় মানবাধিকার ও দুর্যোগ ব্যবস্থাপনা বিষয়ে প্রামাণ্যচিত্র নির্মাণ করে। এছাড়াও অংশগ্রহণমূলক শিক্ষা কার্যক্রমের অংশ হিসেবে বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়গুলোতে রয়েছে নিজস্ব সংবাদপত্র। এর মাধ্যমে শিক্ষার্থীরা গণযোগাযোগ ও সাংবাদিকতা চর্চা করতে পারে। একইভাবে চলচ্চিত্র ও আলোকচিত্র বিষয়ে অংশগ্রহণমূলক শিক্ষা কার্যক্রমে শিক্ষার্থীরা যেমন একত্রিতভাবে কাজ করার শিক্ষা পায়, তেমনি প্রত্যেকে আলাদাভাবে শিক্ষকের সাথে সমস্যা নিয়ে কথা বলতে পারে। আধুনিক প্রযুক্তির এই যুগে গণমাধ্যম শিক্ষার্থীদের অবশ্যই টেলিভিশন ও রেডিওর সাথে পরিচয় থাকা উচিত। তাই মানসম্পন্ন বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়গুলোতে নিজস্ব রেডিও এবং ক্যাম্পাস টেলিভিশন আছে। এখানে শিক্ষার্থীরা পেশাগত জীবনের জন্য হাতে কলমে শিক্ষা পায়। অংশগ্রহণমূলক শিক্ষা ব্যবস্থায় সবচেয়ে ভালো দিকটি হল লেখাপড়া শেষে শিক্ষার্থীরা চাকুরির জন্য উপযোগী জীবন বৃত্তান্ত উপস্থাপন করতে পারে, যেখানে তাদের নির্মিত ও প্রচারিত নাটক, প্রামাণ্যচিত্র, সাংবাদিকতার উদাহরণ বা প্রদর্শনীতে অংশ নেওয়া ভিজুয়াল আর্ট, ভিডিও আর্ট, অ্যানিমেশন ও ওয়েবসাইট ডিজাইনের মতো সৃষ্টিশীল কাজ যুক্ত করতে পারে। এটা প্রমাণ করে নতুন প্রজন্মকে বৈশ্বিক যোগাযোগে আরও যোগ্য করে তুলতে অংশগ্রহণমূলক শিক্ষা পদ্ধতি সেরা।
So Tunku, as a journalist, would you say that journalists are born or can they be taught?
Well, yes. I mean, it's a bit of both. Some are born, but sure, for sure. You can teach journalists the same way you can teach people to be doctors or lawyers or economists. You know, Dr. Jude here is living proof that you can teach people how to write and teach people how to edit and report. You can teach good journalism, and that's what is really our salvation when faced with the potential complexities of blogging.
Excellent to know. So there's also new movement to online education. Coursera, edX, Harvard, MIT are using these online forms. Do you think journalism is the sort of thing that could take advantage of online education?
Sure. I think all education will have an online component at some point, and there's no reason why journalism should be any different.
Zafar, a lot of foreign journalists come to Bangladesh and they write investigative reporting. Why do you think that our journalists are not doing more investigative journalism?
I actually think that for most of the foreign media, they would do better if they hired local journalists rather than have someone come in here, parachute in and try and get the story. So I think a lot of that has to do with just the way most foreign media operate. So that's the first issue. I do think that we need to develop our investigative journalistic capabilities in Bangladesh more. We don't have much of a history of it, we don't have much of a tradition of it, and I think there's also a very well-founded fear of reprisal within the country. You do have to be very careful about what you say and how you say it. Nevertheless, I would like to see investigative journalism being given more importance here, and I do see students coming out of journalism programs like ULabs